Welcome back to Forgotten Ties, where we uncover the shocking truths hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Today, we delve into a story that starts with a simple, innocuous envelope, yet spirals into a family's deepest, most terrifying secrets. This isn't just about a letter, it's about the unsettling revelation of a life completely unknown to its own blood. Our story begins with Elara Vance, a woman in her early 40s living a seemingly perfect life in the quiet suburbs of Providence, Rhode Island. She was an accomplished architect with a loving husband, David, and two bright-eyed children. Their life was a postcard of American success, a meticulously manicured lawn, a two-story colonial home, and weekends spent at the local farmers market. But as we know, the prettiest facades often conceal the darkest mysteries. One crisp October morning, as Elara sorted through the mail, an envelope unlike any other caught her eye. It was thick, a heavy cream color, and addressed with elegant, looping calligraphy. There was no return address. The scent of old paper and something faintly floral clung to it, a strange, almost nostalgic aroma. A lump formed in Elara's throat. She was a woman of logic and order, but this envelope felt different. It felt like it held a weight she couldn't yet comprehend. Inside, the contents were sparse but devastating. A single, heavy card, embossed with the name Serafina Vance. And underneath, a simple, gut-wrenching message: "You're invited to the funeral of my beloved daughter, Serafina Vance, who passed away on October 10th, 2025. Services will be held." Elara's breath hitched. Serafina Vance. The name echoed in her mind. Who was Serafina? Was it a distant cousin? An aunt she'd never met? Then her eyes fell on the next line. She was a loving daughter, a doting mother, and a cherished sister to her family. Sister. The word struck her like a physical blow. Elara had no sister. She was an only child, a fact her parents had drilled into her since childhood. Her father, a stoic and reserved man, had often said, "You are our entire world, Elara. The only one we ever wanted." Her mother, a gentle soul, had echoed the sentiment with a bittersweet smile that Elara never quite understood. The card didn't just invite her, it insisted on her presence, stating, "Your presence would mean so much to the family." She spoke of you often. Spoke of her? But Elara didn't know a Serafina. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was some cruel prank, a twisted joke aimed at a grieving family. Yet, the calligraphy, the heavy paper, the sheer solemnity of it all, it felt real. Too real. The next few hours were a blur of confusion and disbelief. Elara called her parents, her hands shaking as she held the card. Her father's voice, usually steady and calm, was strained. "What are you talking about, Elara? You don't have a sister." His denial was immediate and firm, but something in his tone was off. A flicker of panic quickly masked. Her mother, on the other hand, was silent. A silence that spoke volumes. When Elara pressed her, all her mother would say was, "Some things are best left buried, my dear." But Elara couldn't bury this. The existence of a sister she never knew about, a sister who had just died, was a chasm that had opened up in the foundation of her life. The card had given her a location for the funeral, a small, non-denominational church in a remote part of upstate New York. It was a long drive, but Elara felt a pull, a morbid curiosity that she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a funeral invitation, it was a ghost from her past, a phantom limb of her family tree she never knew existed. She had to go. She had to know who Serafina Vance was. As she packed a small bag, Elara's mind reeled. Was this a mistake? Was she walking into a trap? Was this even her family? The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. Why had her parents hidden this from her for so long? What was so terrible about Serafina that her existence had to be erased? And why, after all this time, was she suddenly being summoned to her funeral? The clock was ticking. The funeral was tomorrow. Elara couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step into a world she was never meant to see, a world where the beautiful life she knew was just a carefully constructed lie. The silence from her parents, the subtle panic in her father's voice, her mother's cryptic words, It all pointed to a story far more sinister than a simple family secret. The invitation was a Pandora's box, and she had just opened it. As the car pulled out of the driveway, Elara glanced at the two-story colonial in her rearview mirror. The house looked different now, less like a home and more like a stage where a play of falsehoods had been performed for her entire life. She was no longer just Elara Vance, the architect. She was now a seeker of truth, chasing a dead sister and the ghosts of her family's past. The drive to upstate New York was a journey through a landscape as somber as Elara's mood. The autumn trees, once a vibrant tapestry of color, were now shedding their leaves, their bare branches reaching like skeletal fingers against a gray sky. The closer she got to the church, the more the air seemed to thicken with unspoken grief. The church itself was a small, stone building tucked away on a lonely, wooded road. It wasn't the kind of place where grand funerals were held. It was a place for quiet, private sorrow. As Elara stepped out of her car, a shiver ran down her spine, unrelated to the cold. A handful of mourners were already gathered outside, their faces etched with a profound sadness. They were a diverse group, an elderly woman in a black coat with a floral scarf, a young couple holding hands, a man with a weathered face and kind eyes. They all looked at her, not with recognition, but with a shared, curious glance. It was clear she was an outsider. She made her way inside. The small sanctuary smelled of old wood and dying lilies. At the front, a simple, closed coffin rested on a stand, surrounded by bouquets of white flowers. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The physical manifestation of a secret that had haunted her family for decades. She looked at the photos on a nearby table, and her breath caught. A woman with dark, wavy hair and a smile that seemed to light up her face. It was the same smile as her mother's, the same expressive eyes, the same high cheekbones. It was like looking at a version of her mother from a different time, a different life. This was Serafina. A woman in her 60s, with her mother's eyes, but a much older, wearier expression, approached her. She was the one from the funeral card, the mother of the deceased. Her voice, when she spoke, was a soft, frayed whisper. "You must be Elara, Serafina's sister." The words felt strange, alien, yet undeniable. The woman's name was Evelyn. She didn't hug Elara or show any outward joy. Instead, she looked at her with a profound, almost sorrowful gratitude. "Thank you for coming. I knew she'd want you here." Evelyn led her to a quiet corner, away from the other mourners. "Serafina always spoke of you," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of reverence and regret. "She had a picture of you on her bedside table. She used to call you the star of the family. She was so proud of you, even though she never met you." The words were like a dagger twisting in Elara's heart. She had a sister who loved her, who was proud of her, and she had never known. The lie her parents had told her felt more like a betrayal now than a simple omission. The small gathering began. Evelyn spoke of Serafina's life, of her strength, her kindness, her quiet resilience. She spoke of her love for painting and gardening, her devotion to her own daughter, Chloe, who was now a teenager. And as she spoke, Elara pieced together a life she had been robbed of. A life that had existed in parallel to her own, just a few states away. A life that had known struggle and hardship, a stark contrast to her own privileged existence. But there were gaps in the story. Evelyn never spoke of Serafina's father. When Elara gently asked, Evelyn's face clouded over. "He was a man who made his choices," was all she said. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with a resentment that was palpable. It was clear that the father, Elara's father, was a forbidden topic. He was the reason for this separation, for this buried life. The pieces were starting to fit, forming a mosaic of a terrible, hidden history. After the service, Evelyn handed Elara a small box. "These were Serafina's," she said, her voice trembling. "She wanted you to have them." Inside, Elara found a few of Serafina's sketches, beautiful, haunting drawings of nature and people, rendered with an incredible skill. And underneath, a worn, leather-bound journal. "She wrote in this every day," Evelyn explained. "Maybe it will answer some of your questions." Elara held the journal in her hands, her fingers tracing the faded gold lettering on the cover. It felt like holding a part of Serafina, a physical connection to the sister she had just met and just lost. As she drove back home, the sky now a deep, inky black, the questions in her mind began to multiply. Who is Serafina? What was the real story behind her life and her death? And what had her father done that was so unforgivable that it had cost her the one person who could have been her closest friend? The journal was the key. It was a lockbox of secrets, and she was about to turn the key. The journey of discovery was just beginning, and she knew, deep in her gut, that the truth was going to be far more painful and complicated than she could ever imagine. Back in the quiet confines of her Providence home, Elara sat alone, the worn leather-bound journal resting on her lap. The house felt different now, the carefully arranged furniture, the framed family photos on the mantelpiece, her children's drawings on the refrigerator, it all felt like a stage set for a lie. The air was heavy with the weight of the untold story she was about to uncover. She took a deep breath, her heart a drumbeat in the silent room, and opened the journal to the first page. Serafina's handwriting was elegant and flowing, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions her words described. The first entries were from her teenage years, filled with the innocent hopes and dreams of a young woman. She wrote of her love for her mother, Evelyn, and her quiet life in the countryside. But then the tone shifted. There was a new figure in her life, a man she called the professor, a brilliant, charismatic man who came to town on a research trip. The entries described a whirlwind romance, a secret affair kept hidden from her mother. The details were vague, but the passion was palpable. Elara's hands trembled. The timeline, the details, they all lined up with her own parents' courtship. Her father had been a professor, a historian who had traveled extensively for his research. A cold dread began to creep up her spine. The professor in Serafina's journal, was it her father? The thought was a repulsive jolt, but the evidence was too compelling. The more she read, the more the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture of betrayal and deceit. Then came the entry that confirmed her worst fears. Serafina wrote of a letter, a secret rendezvous in a nearby city, and a devastating confrontation. The professor, her father, had confessed. He was already engaged to another woman, Elara's mother. He had promised Serafina a future he had no intention of keeping. The entry was filled with a searing, raw agony. Serafina described his cold demeanor, his dismissal of their relationship as a foolish mistake, and his final, chilling words, "This never happened. You will never speak of this to anyone. For your own good." The entry ended with a heart-wrenching revelation. She was pregnant. The next few pages were a dark descent into despair. Serafina wrote of her mother's discovery, the shame, the fear, and the difficult decision to keep the baby. She wrote of her father's absence, his complete and utter abandonment of them both. He had disappeared, leaving them to fend for themselves, starting a new, clean life with another woman, a life that would eventually include Elara. Serafina was a casualty of that new life, a secret buried deep in the past, an inconvenient truth that had to be erased. Elara read on, her mind reeling. The journal was a chronicle of Serafina's quiet suffering and incredible strength. She wrote about raising her daughter, Chloe, on her own, of the love she had for her, and the struggles she faced. But the most painful entries were about Elara. Serafina wrote of watching her from afar, of seeing her father's new family in the local newspaper, of seeing photos of Elara graduating, getting married, having children of her own. She wrote of the bitter envy and the profound, aching love she felt for the sister she could never know. "She is the life I was supposed to have," one entry read, "and I am the ghost of the life he tried to forget." The journal was a devastating testament to the life Elara had been robbed of. A life with a sister who was her blood, her history, and her parallel universe. But then, a new mystery arose in the final entries. Serafina had written of a man who had started visiting her. He was an old acquaintance of her father's, and he was asking strange questions about her. He seemed to know something about her past, something Serafina herself wasn't aware of. The final entry was a single, terrifying sentence. "He came again today. I think he knows about the inheritance. The word hung in the air, a final, ominous note. An inheritance? What inheritance? Elara closed the journal, her hands shaking. This wasn't just a story of betrayal and a hidden sister. This was a story of greed, of a secret that ran deeper than she ever could have imagined. Her father's betrayal wasn't just about love, it was about something far more tangible, something he had been desperate to keep hidden. And it was this secret that had led to Serafina's death. The funeral invitation wasn't just a summons, it was a warning. The truth she had been chasing was not just about her family's past, but about a present danger that had already claimed one life. The revelation of the inheritance was the final, terrifying piece of the puzzle. Elara spent the next few days in a daze, the journal's words replaying in her mind. Her father's sudden panic, her mother's silence, it all made sense now. The lie wasn't just to protect her from a difficult truth, it was to protect a secret that had led to Serafina's death. But what was this inheritance? And who was the mysterious man who had been asking questions? She started digging. She researched her father's history, his early career, his family background. She found a distant relative, a great-uncle who had died years ago, leaving behind a vast estate. The will was a complicated document, and a small part of it was a trust, set aside for any children born out of wedlock to his descendants. A safety net, a way to protect those who might be left behind. It was a small but significant fortune. The catch? The trust was to be claimed by the child, and only the child. Serafina was that child. Her father had known about the trust. He had known that if Serafina came forward, a part of the fortune he had inherited would have to be shared. He had kept her existence a secret, not just to protect his new life, but to keep her from claiming what was rightfully hers. And someone else had known about it too. The man who had been asking questions, the man Serafina had mentioned in her journal. Elara decided to confront her father one last time. She drove to her parents' home, the pristine facade now looking like a cage. She laid the journal on the coffee table. Her father's face went pale. Her mother, her eyes filled with tears, simply looked away. Elara told them everything she had learned. Her father, finally, broke down. He confessed to everything: the affair, the abandonment, the knowledge of the trust. He had hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Serafina, just to make sure she never found out about the trust. But the investigator had gone rogue. He had seen an opportunity for blackmail, and when Serafina had resisted, he had done something. The police had ruled it a tragic accident, a fall down a flight of stairs. But Elara knew better. The man had come for the inheritance, and in doing so, he had taken a life. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. Elara's father was not the kind, upstanding man she had always believed him to be. He was a man who had traded one life for another, who had let a sister be erased from her life, and who had let a secret fester until it had claimed a life. The legacy of her family wasn't one of love and success, but of betrayal, greed, and silent suffering. The funeral invitation was not just an invitation to a funeral, it was a final, tragic plea for her to know the truth. Serafina had wanted her to know. She had wanted to be found. As the story of Serafina came to a close, a heavy sadness settled over Elara. But with that sadness came a sense of purpose. She had a new family now, Evelyn and Chloe. They were her blood, her true family. She could not bring Serafina back, but she could honor her memory. She could ensure that the man who had taken her life, the man who had worked for her father, was brought to justice. The secrets of the past were now her fight in the present. The funeral invitation was the beginning of her journey, and it was a path that would lead her to a truth far more profound than she had ever imagined. This story of Elara and Serafina is a testament to the power of secrets and the devastating legacy they leave behind. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones keeping the most terrifying secrets. It's a reminder that sometimes, the truth we seek is the very thing we are most afraid to find. And if this story has captured your attention, if it has sent a shiver down your spine and made you question the secrets in your own life, then please consider giving this video a like. And if you want to uncover more stories like this, more tales of hidden truths and shocking revelations, Be sure to subscribe to Forgotten Ties and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and remember, some ties are forgotten, but never truly broken.